Okay, I'm going to show you my workflow for creating LUTs and getting a film look in the proper color space using the GH4 recorded footage. A couple things to help out in getting the proper look. Number one is even exposure. Forget all this nonsense about overexposing or underexposing two stops. I like to use the Cinelike D profile because the Vlog profile for Panasonic tends to be a bit grainy, and I think it does some interesting weird things to the highlights. Puts some purple magenta into them that I don't like. So Cinelike D is a fairly flat profile, but I shoot with even exposure, as even as I can. Sometimes your shadows just are a little under, but your key subject should be evenly exposed. Next thing is really good white balance. So a couple ways to do that: shoot into a 18% gray card, or use a diffuser. I use the Expo Disc white balancer. In lieu of that, if your scene has a ton of color or different lighting values, best thing to do is put a white reflector in front of your key light source with the same intensity of lighting that your main subject has. Expose for that, or white balance to that, and that'll help you out. So before you add any color profiles or LUTs, you need to get your footage balanced properly. So you can see here, this is 422 10-bit footage being recorded with a Shogun coming out of the Panasonic into the Shogun, and it's a 422 10-bit profile piece of footage. And you already noticed that even though I had even exposure on my camera, there are highlights that are kind of clipped. So I like to do each operation in its own node. So I'll leave the source untouched, and I'll add a serial node. This is DaVinci Resolve 16 beta, and in this node we'll do some basic corrections to get. We're going to look at our scopes over here, and we're going to first start with the gain, the highlights. Bring the highlights, and you see that there's information above that line, and we want to get that information to where it peaks at the top and doesn't clip at the top. Same thing for the low end. Yeah, you could push it down to about right there. There is some information there, but I think that's the black on the chart. So I'm going to push the blacks to where these tips hit. You notice it's a little unbalanced there, but that's just the scene. There's more blue in there, and the blues aren't as saturated. So I wouldn't worry about balancing this necessarily. We could do a slight amount of balancing here to see if it would work out. If you went to the low area, you can move that channel and land it right about there. And looks like towards the mid-range and the gain, we might have the same situation. There we go. Where if I balance these, and this takes a little bit of finagling here, especially if you don't have trackballs to do this, or a control interface. It's just wiggling while you're looking at the histogram. Okay, bam. Now that looks fairly white balanced. You look at our image, it looks pretty gray. This was a pretty light gray wall, and it looks pretty clean. So that's a balanced image that's been set. So now we can do our color corrections on this chart. And so we'll add another node in line with that. And on this node, we're going to use this cool feature in DaVinci Resolve that understands how to deal with color charts, and you get one-click color control. So I'm going to go to this. You'll notice that it gives you this little chart you can align, but right out of the gates it's using the X-Rite, and we need to use data color Spider Checker 24, which is what that card is. I love the support they have for these color correction cards, because this is doing some serious color science to your image. Way more granular control than you could ever do on your own without some serious practice. So if you're not a colorist by trade, I recommend using color charts with proper white balance and even exposure. You want to make sure they hold this card the right side up, and so that they don't put any shadows from their fingers onto the swatches. because you want those swatches to be just what they are. Also, you see there's green on the top left corner. He's holding it, so green's in the top left corner for that card. So, and what we're going to do here is not going to worry about my Cinelike D profile or what target. Leave these alone. The source gamma and the target gamma, we're going to go to Rec 709. It just makes things easier to deal with on your average monitor. Unless you have some crazy calibrated monitor, leave it at Rec 709 and leave the color temperature alone as well. And now I'm going to press match, because that's aligned on there. You press match and bang, it aligns and does some crazy stuff. If we look at our other scopes, the swatches, I don't know if you can see that. We've got a vector scope here. Click vector scope, single vector scope. There we go. There's our little swatches, and without the color correction, they were down here. They were pretty much aligned, but they weren't in the intensities of the card calibrated. And it also did rotate this very slightly. To do that kind of correction by hand would be 45 minutes. So that's cool. We're going to switch off this and go back to Parade. Oops, go to Parade. And now we can apply a LUT. So we get it into a Rec 709 baseline, and then we worry about putting a film LUT on it. So I'm going to add a new node, and we're going to get rid of the color chart little interface there. And we'll go back to color. And I like to use some of these filmstock LUTs. So this makes your footage look like film. Once you have a balanced image, these LUTs are looking for balanced images, well shot, well exposed images. So I'm not going to choose GH4 Cinelike D, even though that's what I shot it with, because I have really, with that color chart, pushed this into Rec 709 spec. I mean, right to spec. So use the Rec 709 LUT, and I happen to like, there's a bunch of them in here, I happen to like this Tetrachrome 400, and I'm using the FC. This stands for Cineon, and some other thing, and then VS. FC is the full color one made for Rec 709. I'm just going to drag it out onto the node and watch what happens. Bingo. It doesn't look like a whole lot, but there is a lot of color science that has just happened to our image. Also, you see that we've kind of pushed our blacks up and our highlights down a little bit. Film response curves are like that. They don't blow the highlights out like video does. Now, if we go to the regular piece of footage, we don't have to do all this color science again. Resolve allows you to apply the other color correction on another clip by pressing the middle mouse button on that clip. So I select the clip I want, then I press middle mouse button, and pow, it's in range. So I'm going to press play, and you can see that this really does look like it has been shot on a film stock. It has this beautiful kind of creamy highlight roll off, and the skin tones look fantastic, and everything looks like it was shot maybe on an Arri Alexa or something of that nature. So that's what I like to use, and you can do this even without a color chart. I would use the same tactics. So let's go to a piece of footage that we shot, and I basically used auto white balance on the GH4 to shoot this because there was a lot of different light play going on, and I figured let's just let the camera go for it. The camera does a pretty good job actually. So here's our untouched piece. We're going to add a node, bang, and now we're going to look at our image, and we see that there are some things that are probably pushed above the line there. So let's go to highlights first and bring them down, and yeah, there's a bunch of stuff up there, but you see the clip line. That's probably the sunshine of these highlights, the brightest highlights. They just got clipped, you know, it happens. Let's go to the lift, and this is going towards the bottom of the scale. Whoops, I moved it. I'm gonna hit result. Okay. Whenever you, if you hit something on accident, just undo it. You don't want to try to go in there and noodle it back. It's just too tedious. So I'm going to bring these down to black right at the line, and now I've stretched my dynamic range as far as it'll go. So that looks fine. I'm looking at the balance here, and I see that the blue right here is hitting generally in the same place, but it looks like there's a little bit of a diagonal line here. So let's see if we can fix that. This is up in the highlights. I don't know what that is. This is up in the highlights, so we're going to mess with the gain control here. Same deal. move our knobs until these even out, essentially. Doesn't have to be perfect. I do see my highlights are dropping and the other ones aren't. So I'm watching the top highlights while I do this and the middle, and I think that's why this pretty much is in balance. If I do anything weird, it'll drop this blue highlight down. My blue highlights will turn a little purple. And so I like this. It looks flat, it looks even, it looks balanced. Let's move on. Add a node. We're going to now apply the LUT right on top of that. And I'll do it this way, where we just do a LUT on top of a balanced image. And I'll do the actual LUT from another shot color chart. And sometimes gambling like that, you get lucky and it looks fantastic as well. So let's do tetrachrome again and see what tetrachrome does. Drop it on. Bingo. Ooh, very nice. This has this really sweet kind of look to it. And let's just play it a little bit and see how it looks. I like it. It's very smooth. It's got these really, they're kind of punched up, like the blacks don't go black, because black is these black bars. That's 100% black. Look how gray they are and how much information is in there. You know, down here, this is 422 10-bit as well. This was recorded from a 3-axis gimbal plugged into a Ninja monitor that was recording 422 10-bit ProRes. Very cool. I like it. I'm going to shut this one off. You just click the clear and it'll shut that off. I'm going to add another one. And let's add a different LUT, or different, yeah, let's go up here. We've got Fuji Color Superior 200. This does a lot of, it brightens and does a lot with color. Let's see if we can get some of those reds to pop. Bing. A little pinkish actually. Interesting, but weird. So I'm going to reset it. I'm going to go back down to maybe Fuji Color, Fuji Pro 400. This ought to be fairly, yeah, that definitely accented the pink. Pink in the highlights. This is kind of what I was talking about when you shoot in vlog. It ends up looking like that. I don't like that. I don't like pink highlights. It's probably going to get very pink if I go Fuji Color 200. Yeah, almost purple. It's a cool look. It could actually work. And you can always correct out the pink part if you want. But, you know, the LUT is doing a lot, and all you want to do is minor secondary stuff on top of a LUT. So I actually like this right here. And let's take this right here and reset it and make this a secondary color correction where we're going to punch this up a little bit. So I would go in and probably do something like a little color boost to see where my colors can go, and possibly temperature change. We can go cool, which looks very IBM-like. I would even desaturate that more, but if you go warm, it becomes kind of interesting. We could also do some things where we pull a little of that green teal stuff going on. So I mean, we could crunch these down. What's that's going south on me there? Very subtle there, very subtle change. Even a little bit of that in the gamma. This will get our blue greens, and now punch the gains back up into flesh tone. And whoops, lost my picture. GPU full. Great. It happens when I'm recording the screen at the same time. So this is kind of weird. It's kind of an interesting look. The highlights turned golden, like the sun was coming down. But again, these LUTs really look like film when you do a balance on top of. You get your footage balanced first, even exposure, and the other things that give you film look obviously are 24 frames a second and 180 degrees shutter. So this is shot at 24 frames a second straight, and the shutter speed is set to 180 degrees, but it's actually shooting at a 48th of a second. If you shoot a 50th of a second, that'll still work. It's not perfect, but close enough. But you don't want to change that shutter speed ever, because the shutter speed is what's giving that cadence of film. A film camera cannot do a 270 degree shutter. There's no such thing. It's 180 degrees. So when you keep that in respect, you end up with this motion blur. And if I go frame by frame here, you'll see that that subtle motion blur is even stepping forward and moving up and down. That is filmic. Um, the other part of it is depth of field, and to get depth of field, use a larger sensor, use cinema lenses, and you end up getting a fairly close approximation of a film camera. And then when you're done with your look, so we got this look here. When you're done with this, you can export the cube file. So you just right click on the scene here, generate 3D LUT cube. It'll prompt you with a file name, and you name it. And it's going to take the file name of the clip itself, so you might have to rename it after you save it to something shorter, because it'll be this big long file name. But those LUTs can be used in Premiere, in Edius, in Avid, in Final Cut, in various ways as an input LUT when you do color corrections, and it's a one-click color correction. So DaVinci Resolve's very good for that. And that's how I do my initial color corrections. I create LUT files, save them alongside the other files as sidecar files, and apply them in post as I edit, so that I don't have to worry too much about matching cameras and doing all that stuff. So I hope you enjoyed that. Enjoy color correcting.